Hotel and welcome. Kemetic legacy today. Kemetic legacy today. Life, health, and strength to you all. Kemetic legacy today. Hotep. Kemetic legacy today.
Hetepu. Welcome to Kemetic Legacy Today, your weekly journal of ancient African, ancient Kemetic history and spirituality. My name is Jabari-Osaze, also known as Heru DjedenMa'at Aten-Ra.
And my name is Daniels-Osaze, also known as Nfr-Ka.
We're really excited to be able to continue this particular series for you. You may remember that we did a full discussion, dialogue on the maxims of Ptahhotep, and we've moved on to another piece of literature from what the Kemetic folks would call Sebayit, the Sebayit literature, the wisdom literature. And so now we're dealing with the instructions of Amenemope. And this is our second episode in this particular series. And so we're excited to be able to bring this to you, particularly because our focus is hopefully to assist you with living a more ma'atical life, living a life that is more in balance, living a life that is closer to the grace that your ancient Kemetic ancestors planned for you. And so by doing that, we are looking at this particular document, and I think it's going to be quite interesting because in our reading already, we've seen some things that are unusual and are prime for discussion. So we're really looking forward to get to it.
Well, I think what's also very important about the instructions of Amenemope is that you'll see in the Bible that many of the translations in the Bible are similar to what you'll see in Amenemope. So it's believed that it actually came from his instructions. So what we're going to do is actually show you some of the correlations with some of the verses so you can actually find it in the Bible and be able to make a comparison.
And the particular section of the King James Bible, we're using the New King James Version. The particular section in the King James Bible are generally referred to as the Book of Proverbs. And you'll note that some of the wording seems almost exactly the same.
So now chapter 9. Do not fraternize with a hot-tempered man, nor approach him to converse. Safeguard your tongue from answering your superior, and take care not to speak against him. Do not allow him to cast words only to entrap you, and be not too free in your reply. With a man of his own station discuss the reply, and take care of speaking thoughtlessly. When a man's heart is upset, words travel faster than wind and rain. He is ruined and created by his tongue, and yet he speaks slander. He makes an answer deserving of a beating, for its work is evil. He sails among the world, but his cargo is false words. He acts the ferryman in knitting words. He goes forth and comes back arguing. But whether he eats or whether he drinks inside, his accusation waits for him without. The day when his evil deed is brought to court is a disaster for his children. Even Khnum will straightway come. Even Khnum will straightway come. The creator of the ill-tempered man, and he turns one eye to the other, is like a wolf cub in the farmyard. For he sets families to argue. He goes before all winds like clouds. He darkens his color in the sun. He crocks his tail like a baby crocodile. He curls himself into an inflict of harm. His lips are sweet, but his tongue is bitter, and fire burns inside him. Do not fly up to join that man, not fearing you will be brought to account.
This is interesting because I think on one hand, Amenemope is actually telling us not to become linked with an ill-tempered person. But on the same token, the description of the ill-tempered person is so extensive that it's very possible that he may be saying, be careful that the ill-tempered person is not you, which is interesting.
Well, he starts off talking about, again, it sounds like these are the rules of a business, how to go to work and handle your business the appropriate way. Because he starts off saying, the ill-tempered man could be a supervisor. And don't allow that supervisor to trap you with words, because that'll force you to say something that you'll probably regret later on. What's best is to find someone on your level to discuss it with at a calm pace, and then come back and say what you need to say. Because if you give yourself a chance to think before speaking, you'll always be in a better position. So, he's trying to warn you, sometimes your supervisor is going to say something that might put you in a difficult position, but don't respond right away. Think about it, talk to someone on your level, and then come back later on with a more appropriate response. And I think we've all been in a situation
I think
like
everyone
that.
has. Anyone who's been in the world of work in virtually any field for any considerable period of time has met someone who tends to say things that are just inappropriate. And it's even more challenging when that person is someone who supervises you. Because clearly there's some things you'd like to say to someone who is a subordinate or an equal that you shouldn't say to someone who is supervising you if you want to keep your position. And so he's not saying that you should allow someone to ill-treat you, but he is saying to be cool about what you're saying, right? And particularly because a person who is speaking ill will never prevail in the end, is something else that he's saying. And it uses some very beautiful imagery as well. I think he says something like, something about his words, and they're actually sailing him.
Well, it says, when a man's heart is upset, words travel faster than wind and rain. I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to.
No, there's another section that seems to use a boat analogy.
He sails among all the world, but his cargo is false words.
That is just beautiful. He sails among all the world, but his cargo is false words. Now think about what that means. We're talking about someone who has interaction with a large number of people. And as they have interaction, all they do is sow the seeds of discontent. I'm sure you know someone like this. Someone who goes along and wherever they are, they say things that are negative about people, and they sort of sow these seeds, and often what happens is those other people actually respond to it as well, at least until they realize what the person's game is really about. And so this person is going about everywhere, just doing things that are inappropriate. And so he says, be very careful about that person because they are ill-tempered and that in the end they will not succeed. He also uses another beautiful analogy here about his lips being sweet but his tongue being bitter. Now I wonder if he's talking about those individuals who say one thing to one person and something else to someone else.
It's possible.
The person that has the forked tongue. Or he may be talking about that person that cloaks the most inappropriate and insensitive language in things that sound like compliments. I think you've probably all met people like that as well. They say they're giving you a compliment, but they're actually saying something very negative. You look really nice today, because usually you just look inappropriate. I mean, disheveled. I like your hair, but your hair is, it looks good today, but not as good as it could possibly look. And usually it just is ugly. I had a mentee once that spoke like that. I'm sure if she's watching, she's going to know I'm talking about her. But I used to always say that she was the queen of cross-sided compliments. And at one point she said, Mr. Osaze, what is a cross-sided compliment? And I had her think about it. And she finally said, I think I understand what you're saying. I said, well, be careful. That's the reason why you think you're complimenting someone and you mean well, you think you mean well, but then within 5 minutes you're in an argument. And then when I come to intervene, you say, but I was complimenting her. I was complimenting him. Why did they get upset? They got upset because she was giving these cross-sided compliments. And it sounds like this is the kind of person he's talking about here as well.
Well, I thought it was interesting that he took an aspect of the Creator that we normally think of as a positive aspect in Khnum. And Khnum is the aspect of the Creator who actually, in mythology, was supposed to be the one who created people on a potter's wheel and actually molded them
Khnum
into
or
who
Ptah.
Ptah. And they molded the person into who they were supposed to become. But in this instance, they're saying, even Khnum will straightway come, the creator of an ill-tempered man. So in some effect, they're saying you have taken on the role of Khnum, that you are the one creating. But instead of creating something positive, you're continuing to create something negative, and you're molding it repeatedly. And that's something that you need to work on about yourself.
I honestly have to say I wasn't sure what he meant by that reference. I need to do a little bit more research because I really didn't understand what the reference was. If Khnum was the kind of Nter or deity that was generally connected to the afterlife, I would think that he was referring to someone passing into the other world and becoming an ancestor, but I have to give some more thought. We also know that sometimes they say that Khnum or those beings that are described as Khnum, because Khnum is often looked at, given the head of a ram. Sometimes I think that when they do that, they're referring to the wind, because we know that there are certain rams that are connected to Shu, and they are wind spirits. And so perhaps he's talking about hot air. Who knows what he's talking about here? But it sounds like he could be talking about that as well. I think it's interesting that this particular maxim in the next, chapter 9 and chapter 10, seem to reference a section of Proverbs. But what I'll do is I'll read it after 10, and then you'll make your decision at home as to which one it sounds closer to. It sounds like, to some degree, some of the content of 9 seems to refer to 10, to this particular section of the Proverbs. But the wording of 10 seemed to jive particularly closely to this section of the Bible. So tell us what you think.